Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach, and today we have with us Joel Hawbaker, who is with Real Life Leading. Welcome to the program, Joel.
Thank you very much. I am excited to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Super. I am as well, and I always love hearing about people and how they start their business and focus, and I know you work a lot with kids and obviously Real Life Leading. The focus is on leaders and leadership, but give us a little bit of background on yourself and how you came to start Real Life Leading.
Certainly. I am by trade. I'm a high school history and Bible teacher, and I coach high school soccer as well. And so in doing those things, I'm also divorced and remarried. I've got two daughters, and so a large part of what I focus on in working with kids is teaching them how to have better relationships, and a lot of that comes from my own world in terms of coming from a divorced home and then also going through the divorce as an adult in my mid-20s. And so my goal is to help other people have better relationships and lead themselves better so that they can also lead other people better. And again, part of that is because I've seen it done well. Part of that's because I've made plenty of mistakes, and I'd love to help other people avoid them.
You know, that's kind of an interesting contrast because I think a lot of people would initially think, oh, well, I'm not going to follow that guy. He's had a hiccup or a stumble or a bumble. But in reality, sometimes those are the best people to learn from because you're like, look, there's a ditch in the road right there. I fell down in it. Here's my skin knee to prove it. And let me show you. Let me just take your arm here and guide you away from that ditch. Okay, look, you're good to go. So What have you found when you are working with or speaking to groups where, you know, someone, it just seems to just click for them because they have aligned or resonated with something that you've gone through yourself?
Well, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that really helps. You know, I teach high school, and given the divorce rate today, over half the kids that I teach come from divorced homes or they come from blended families. And so, especially because I teach at a small Christian school, a lot of times with kids, there's this perception that if you're a high school teacher and you teach at a Christian school, you've never known anything but Christianity and all you've ever done is have a perfect, easy life, and that's why you're a teacher in a Christian school. And so when I tell them, well, you know, actually my parents split up when I was in middle school, and then I went through a divorce when I was in my mid to late 20s, and now I'm remarried, and my ex-wife is remarried, and we have a blended family because my kids have a stepdad and a stepmom, and they have a little brother at their mom's house, and this is our world. And kids kind of go, oh, so you actually have an idea of where I'm coming from.
Yeah,
oh.
Me too.
And it, you know, helps me make a connection with them. It helps me make a connection with other adults who have been through it. And unfortunately, the church sometimes has gained a reputation of being less welcoming to people who have made mistakes. Yeah. And so part of my goal is to help people realize, no, like, everybody's made mistakes. The church should not be. I wish I could credit whoever said this before me because it's not Joel's words. But someone said the church should not be a museum for saints. It should be a hospital for sinners.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, that's what it is. When I went through my divorce, the people I relied on were my immediate family, but also my church family. And because those are the people, like, that's where you need to go when you're hurting, when you're broken. Church is where you need to be even more. And, you know, if the church isn't accepting people who have made mistakes, then who is? So that's one of the things I like to talk about, is to remind people that what we ought to be doing is learning from our mistakes and then openly, humbly sharing our mistakes to help other people avoid them. I would obviously love for both of my daughters to grow up and get married and stay married to the same person until they're, you know, 110 years old. I would love that. And so how do I try to teach them to do better than I did? By being open and honest about my mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that so many times if you tried to not do that, people like your family would know enough about you to go, why are you saying that? Because I know you're not living that way, or this didn't happen. There's not birds chirping in the background in your life. Things happen to you.
That's right.
Why not just be transparent? Because people know it anyway.
That's right. Well, and kids are, especially high school kids, are really quick to see through a faker.
Yep.
They may not know exactly what you're faking, but they're pretty good at telling when you're not genuine.
Yeah.
And so, again, like you said, one, it's easier, but two, and more importantly, it's just more honest. Just be genuine, be open, obviously use a little bit of discretion. Don't tell them every single detail of every mistake you've ever made, but, be honest. And so I do the same thing in my speaking. You mentioned my business, I call it real life leading. And the reason for that, because whether it's in the home, in a business, in a relationship, in a volunteer organization, the truth is most of us aren't going to be corporate CEOs or military commanders or, professional sports coaches or athletes. Most of us aren't going to be that. Most of us are what I call real life people. And real life people are moms and dads, and they are small business owners, or they are mid-level management people, or they are youth group volunteers, or Sunday school teachers, or civic organization volunteers. And your leadership in those positions is every bit as important. In fact, in my book, I actually argue that the smaller your audience is, the more important your leadership, because you're going to have a bigger impact on a smaller audience. And that's not to knock a CEO of a company with 5,000 employees. The CEO is obviously important. That they live or die by their decisions because they affect 5,000 people. But I also know that I have more impact on my 2 daughters than I do on my 30 soccer players.
Yep.
I spend more time with them. I spend more one-on-one time with them. And because of that, I have a bigger impact on the smaller audience. So that means I need to make sure that regardless of the size of my audience, that my leadership is consistent, that it's honest, that it is integrity-based, and that we are pursuing the correct things.
Well, you said something interesting that I want to go a little deeper on, which is the concept of real life, and it made me think of this. You hear about sales training or leadership training, and you can almost envision that someone that attends the sales training seminar learns the 3 steps to success, and when someone says this as an objection, you say that. And leadership, well, when your team does this, then you need to do that. Well, in my opinion, I think that you would agree with this. In real life, things aren't in that pretty little box with the bow on it.
Exactly. I 100% agree.
So how do you, so in other words, then the question is, you need to know how to lead enough and know it down pat so well so that when real life, pops up and rears its ugly head, you can just bob and weave and not get thrown for a loop. So how does one do that?
That's a great question. I think a lot of it goes back to first self-awareness. You have to know who you are and what you believe and what you stand for. Because I love it. I think it's a military saying. I'm trying to remember who said this one too. They said you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. And so, C.S. Lewis talks about that in his book Mere Christianity. He says that circumstances don't shape our character; they reveal the character that's already there. He says something along those lines. He uses an analogy about if you walk into a basement and turn the light on quickly, you're going to see the rats, but turning the light on didn't create the rats. They were already there.
Yep.
And so the idea there is that we need to know who we are and what we believe and what we stand for, because in the moments when our values are tested, that's what we're going to fall back on. And then it becomes a question, well, how much do you really believe that? And so for me, everything, every aspect of leadership, as a husband, as a father, as a teacher, as a coach, as an author, as a speaker, in my world, everything I do needs to start with humility. And that's a word that for me is drastically misunderstood in the English language, unfortunately. A lot of people think that humility is synonymous with modesty. Yeah, it's weakness or it's modesty. It's when someone says, "Are you good at this?" and you go, "Well, I'm okay."
Yeah, I don't know.
That may be humility, but a lot of times it's dishonesty. I mean, if a kid got a 36 on his ACT and they say, "Are you good at test taking?" and the kid says, "I'm okay." That's not modesty or humility.
Awesome.
That's right. That's not modesty. That's not humility. That's lying. Of course you're good at test taking. You don't accidentally make a perfect score.
If that person played down their skill, then you could be preventing someone else from being impacted positively.
Correct.
And here's an example. One of my daughters is just starting her first year of college, and she is a math genius, and she this summer got a job as a tutor at a local math tutor place, and she's able to help these little elementary, middle school, high school, all these kids with math. Well, if she had said to, the person she was talking to, well, I'm okay with math. Well, maybe she would not have been able to make a positive impact in some of these other
Correct.
people that she all the time is able to do. Now, on the flip side, that doesn't mean that you should be prideful and arrogant, which I know that
Correct.
you're not meaning. But let's talk a little bit about something you preach, teach, and speak on, which is confident humility. So that kind of sounds like a paradox.
That's exactly it. And my book about that is called Inverted Leadership. The first title I thought of actually was just Paradox. And It's because it does sound that way. So the way that I explain that is, people misunderstand confidence and they confuse it with arrogance. Confidence is just simply being sure of what your gifts are. And that's really all it is. It's not shying away from them, but it's also not going out of your way to toot your own horn or, and the way that I help distinguish that, again, I borrow a lot from C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity here. He says that the way that you can tell confidence from pride is that pride is inherently and always competitive. So a confident person would say, like in my position, I would say, I know that I'm a good high school teacher and a good soccer coach. I have years of experience, a lot of training, and the results are pretty clear. A prideful person would simply say, I'm a better teacher than that guy.
Yep.
I'm a better coach than that guy. And that's why pride is inherently competitive.
Because the other guy doesn't have this.
That's exactly it. Yeah, whether it's the results or the technique, but you compare yourself based on something. And again, C.S. Lewis says the prideful person is never content with what they have. They're just always worried about having more than you.
Well, so, isn't it also a factor of like in marketing, it's all about the me or I, and if you can flip it around and look at some of the messaging and say, well, you know what, I'm able to help people achieve what they need and work with them to do X, Y, and Z. Well, all of a sudden now the focus is on that person you're impacting positively, not your skills. So if you as a teacher, speaker, motivator, coach are able to say, you know what, let me just tell you something. We've had some great success and really I attribute it to the whole team and the team I have around me, because if it weren't for the kids that had that work ethic, I could be the world's greatest coach and people wouldn't implement one thing that I said. So I really resonate with what you're saying about how you present that. So here's a question. I know that you do speaking engagements, schools, conferences. What are some of the things that you or themes of messages that you are able to present and that you want your audience to really take away?
Sure. So the first one really is what you asked about a minute ago. It's that idea of confident humility. Yeah. So what that actually is again, the first part is being sure of what your gifts are. And again, C.S. Lewis tells us humility is not yourself. Okay, what am I good at? And how can I use that to benefit other people? Because to me, the absolute crucial component of good leadership is take your own desires out of the equation, and then what would you do? Yeah. Because if I take my ego out of it, my teaching looks different. Because now I have a lot more patience when kids ask questions that I would find ridiculous. Or when my soccer players don't want to do something that I want, and that inconveniences me. Because let's be honest, in our personal lives, most of the time when we get upset, it's not when something giant happens. People understand when we're upset when we have a giant catastrophe. What really happens is when we are minorly inconvenienced and we fly off the handle, that's when we look really bad as leaders. That's when we make big mistakes. Think about how many times you've been driving to work and somebody cuts you off and you get furious about it and it ruins the whole first half of your day. Yeah. Well, that's just pride. I don't like it that you cut me off in traffic, so I'm going to take it out on everybody around me. Well, that's poor leadership. And I'll fully admit when I was younger, I was the world's best at that. And when I realized how much damage that was causing to relationships, that was when I started asking myself the question, okay, what's really at play here? Do I have a right to be upset when someone cuts me off? Well, sure, but only if I'm taking it personally. They didn't cut me off because I'm me. They cut me off because they're in a hurry or they weren't paying attention or a million other reasons.
Or they had an emergency they had to get to. And is my car wrecked? No. I mean, no harm done. Let's move on.
That's right. Just keep on driving. So that's one of the big themes is confident humility itself. Another one.
Continue. That's awesome.
Okay. So yeah, so the second one we talked about a little bit before we came on the air, and that was the idea of the difference between success and impact.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, every leader is going to have to make a decision based on one of those two things. And whether you realize it or not, we are making decisions based on those things. The problem is most of the time we make decisions based on being a success. Now, you can define that in a million different ways. It might be, getting a certain promotion or having a certain base salary or a certain position title. Whatever your definition of success is, it's not a bad thing to pursue success. But if you pursue success as its own end, a lot of times, in fact, every time that I've seen, ultimately it leaves people feeling empty. There's a really famous actor a couple years ago who came out and said, I wish everybody could be rich and famous and have everything they ever desired, and then that would help them realize that it doesn't satisfy.
Yeah.
I think it was Jim Carrey, actually, that said something along those lines. And so the question is, well, if success as its own end isn't good enough, what should we be doing? And my answer to that is focusing on making a positive impact on the people around you. Because if you do that, you will be a success. So for me, what that looks like as a high school coach is that I don't try to focus on winning soccer games. I used to. And because of that, I made some coaching mistakes, meaning that I told players to do things on the soccer field they probably shouldn't have. And it wasn't necessarily cheating, but it also wasn't playing within the fair spirit of the game. You know what I mean? Everybody who's an athlete knows there's a gray area of, is that cheating? Well, it's not really against the rules, but it's also not very sportsmanlike.
Yep.
And when I was younger, I was very ego-driven, especially as a very young coach. You want to make a name for yourself, so you really want to win whatever you can win. And I did some of that. I told players to do stuff that it wasn't illegal, but it also wasn't really sporting. And when I look back at that, I'm ashamed of that, because especially as an outspoken Christian coaching mostly at Christian high schools, that's a terrible testimony to the unbelieving world.
Yep.
What I'm saying is, well, I believe Christianity except for when I'm coaching soccer, and then it's okay to cheat. And that's completely the wrong message to send. And so, again, I'm ashamed when I look back on that. So I try to double down on making sure today that I don't do those things. I want to focus on making a positive impact on my students, because ultimately my soccer players are not going to make a living from soccer. Very few people make a living as a professional athlete or a coach. But every kid I coach is going to be a human being for decades. I need to teach them how to be better people, not better soccer players. We're still going to learn soccer, and praise the Lord, I've been blessed. We've had a really great soccer program, the school I've been at the past 5 years. 2 of the last 3 years, we've been to our state championship game.
Wow.
And that's, we lost both of them, and that kind of stunk. But at the same time, 3 years ago, we had never won a playoff game, or 4 years ago. In 2 years, we went from never winning a playoff game to going to back-to-back state championship games. Well, that's really great success. But at this point, those trophies are 2 or 3 years old. They're collecting dust in a trophy case, and almost every one of those kids has graduated.
Yep.
So what difference does it make now? Well, the answer is, if I've taught them to be good people, if those kids are working or in college or in the military and they are having a positive impact on the world around them, now we're a success. Forget the trophies.
I love it. I think you're exactly right. If more people can do that consistently, then now you've got a movement happening.
Right.
If you could take...
And so apply that to the business world, and it's the same idea.
Well, it's interesting. You can apply it to the ministry. You could apply it to the business world,
right,
your personal life, because those same principles. What is Christ's most prevalent teaching? Love. And
right.
If you can love your neighbor as yourself. Now, let's put it this way. You said something earlier about you need to have self-leadership. Well, remember the last time you flew and they told you about if there's oxygen mask dropping
That's
down,
right.
get it on you before your child.
That's right.
And you feel selfish? Well, it's not selfish, because if you're gasping for air trying to help your child, now you're passed out and so are they. So take care of yourself, take care of the child right then. So self-leadership, helping improve personal development yourself, allows you to make a bigger impact on others. So with a couple of the points you made just a minute ago about your talks, what would you say is one thing that someone could do really immediately when walking away from one of your presentations, that they could feel like, okay, I heard this, I got great points, and I'm going to do this one thing and really get some quick impact on something?
Sure. So what I would say about that is the one of the major takeaways is to just take 5 minutes and examine your 3 to 5 closest relationships and ask yourself a couple of questions about them. Ask yourself, one, what am I giving in this relationship? And how might I maybe do better at that? And two, are there ways that I could be better serving these people around me? Are there ways that I could be helping them that maybe they haven't even thought of? What are some of the things I could do to help them out? I'm married, I've got kids, and so for me, what that looks like is, how am I taking care of my wife? Am I serving her? Am I being a spiritual leader in our home? Am I making sure that her needs and desires and wants are met? And if I am, great. How can I improve on that? And if I'm not, what do I need to change tonight? So for me, again, and I've really seen this in the past few years, I love sports. I could come home every day and immediately turn on soccer or baseball and basketball and just watch it all night. But the truth of the matter is that would not be taking good care of my family. And one of the ways I know that to be true is because in my first marriage, I did that when my kids were younger. I missed out on hours of interaction with my daughters when they were toddlers because I was too busy watching basketball or soccer games on TV. And I would love to have that time back, but I can't. And so what that means is now I have to really be conscious of how I spend my time. Because, again, I'm divorced and remarried. My kids go back and forth between my house and their mom's house each week. So I only get my kids half the time anyway. Well, that means when my kids are with me, my kids and my wife need to be my number one priority. So high school soccer season for me is in the spring. So it's basically January to May. And what that looks like is my younger daughter's birthday is in February, and my wife's birthday is in January. Well, I do not schedule soccer games on my daughter's birthday. And I do not even go to soccer practice on my wife's birthday. My assistant coach coaches, my kids all know on January 8th, Coach Hawbaker will not be at practice because he's going home to see his wife.
Yep.
On February 19th, Coach Hawbaker will not be at practice. We will not have a game that day. It's his daughter's birthday. He's going to go where his daughter is. And I didn't do that my first year at the new high school. I've done it every year since then, and it's something that I don't ever want to change because I need my kids to know that I love them, that I prioritize them, even over my job. And I tell my high school players, listen, it's not that I don't love you, but I want you to also prioritize your family. So we had a girl last year who was on our JV team. She dressed up with our varsity team sometimes. But her family was planning a trip. Her and her mom and her aunt and her sister, they were all going to travel for like 4 days in the spring. It meant she was going to miss a soccer game. And she said, well, Coach, what do I do? I said, go and have a great time. You may not ever have this opportunity again. How many games have you already had this year? Go on the trip because you need to spend time with your family. You're going to be a daughter, a sister, a niece your whole life. Go on the trip and have a great time, and we'll be here when you get back. And that's, again, it's not because I'm great. It's because I've done that poorly in my own world. So my encouragement to people would be examine the closest relationships to you. Ask yourself what you could do better in those things, in those relationships, even just today, even if it's something little like after dinner saying, hey, you know what, honey, I'll clean up the kitchen. Or coming home and immediately turning your work phone off and putting it away for 2 hours so that you're not constantly getting text messages. Whatever, just something little like that. Go home and make sure that you're taking care of your family. Make sure that you're taking care of your team at work. Go to work and just ask a question. Hey, what could I do differently this day that's going to help you do your job better? As opposed to walking in and saying, here's what I expect you to do because I think this will make you do your job better. You might be right, but if you ask them, they may have told you that, and now they're going to be even more on your side because you asked for their feedback.
And one last point that I would make, and then we can wrap up and let people know how to reach out and connect with you. But I would say if you heard some of these things that you could implement, because there's been several great ideas, don't feel like you need to do them all at once because you will feel overwhelmed, and people around you might feel like, all right, give him a week and a half and he'll be right back to normal. But do
That's right.
One thing.
He heard something and went crazy for 3 days, and then he'll be back to normal. That's right.
Do one thing and work
That's right.
on doing it well consistently, and then later on layer in something else, but just baby steps and start off slow.
Absolutely. I think that's a great reminder to not try to do everything all at once, because you're right. It'll feel overwhelming to you, and it'll probably freak out the people around you.
Yep. Well, Joel, great connecting with you here. What's the best way that someone, if they were interested in bringing you in to speak with their school or their group or at a conference, what's the best way that they can reach out and learn more about you and make a connection?
Yeah, so that would be great. The easiest way to get in touch with me is to come to my website. It's reallifeleading.com. Or you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Twitter @RealLifeLeading. You can find me on LinkedIn, Joel Hawbaker. It's like the old television show Hee Haw with Baker on the end of it, H-A-W Baker. Only people from the South get that reference.
Yep, I got it myself.
But it's really helpful. So definitely come find me on social media. Come, you can find the Contact Joel page on my website, and I would love to hear back from some of your audience and find out ways that I could maybe help or serve them in their community, in their business, whatever it may be.
Awesome. Joel, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, Mike. I had a great time.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.